Alosa!
In the final days of 2014, the Earth beneath the mid-Atlantic tore itself open for 77 consecutive days. Millions of tons of molten rock surged outward at terrifying temperatures. The thick magma moved with a slow, suffocating inevitability across the high-altitude basin. It systematically swallowed the isolated villages of Portela and Bangaera, burying human history beneath 8 meters of hardening, impenetrable rock. If I told you that a community refused permanent evacuation, to return and plant seeds directly into the very ashes that consumed their homes, would you believe me? Welcome to Chã das Caldeiras. This is a massive volcanic crater suspended 1,700 meters above the Atlantic Ocean on the island of Fogo, Cape Verde. Here, the horizon is permanently locked behind vertical walls of ancient, fractured rock. The ground is painted in the thick, suffocating black of volcanic pumice, known locally as Pico. The atmospheric pressure at this altitude is noticeably thinner, making every breath carry the faint, metallic scent of subterranean sulfur. I want to take you into this absolute isolation. We follow the silhouette of a local farmer walking across the jagged, lunar landscape. He calmly scatters fragile seeds into the porous, jet-black volcanic ash. He pauses to smoke beneath the towering, dark shadow of the Pico do Fogo cone. Together, we will decode the bizarre, unyielding tenacity of the 1,000 people who chose this exact crater as their permanent home. Instead of accepting the government mandate to relocate the safe coastlines, they made a different choice. They returned to the epicenter of the destruction. They rebuilt their lives directly on top of the newly cooled lava flows. They chose to grow vines and ferment wine in the belly of an active, breathing monster. The morning begins long before the sun manages to breach the high caldera walls. At 1,700 meters, the nighttime temperature drops ruthlessly. The thin air loses its heat rapidly, pulling a freezing, bone-deep chill out of the basalt ground. Heavy atmospheric moisture rolls into the basin from the ocean, wrapping the scattered homes in a thick, damp veil of fog. To survive this daily extreme thermal shift, the residents must construct their shelters using the very geological weapon that destroyed their previous lives. They meticulously carve and stack rough blocks of black basalt, cutting them directly from the hardened lava rivers. These heavy, dense stones possess immense thermal mass. They absorb the intense radiation of the high-altitude sun during the day and slowly radiate that stored heat back into the living quarters during the freezing nights. Many utilize a traditional architectural geometry known as the funko. The circular cylindrical shape of the funko offers no flat surfaces or sharp corners. This design prevents the fierce, howling mountain winds from catching the structure, allowing the destructive gales to simply wrap around the stone walls harmlessly. Inside these thick rock fortresses, Human warmth is preserved under heavy, hand-woven wool blankets. A small, controlled fire is sparked in the hearth. This fire is fed using whatever brittle, dry twigs and dead brush can be scavenged from the barren volcanic slopes. In this high-altitude desert, liquid water is mathematically more precious than blood. There are absolutely no rivers, no streams, and no natural aquifers within the caldera basin. Biological survival is strictly tethered to the engineering of underground cisterns. These deep, sealed concrete tanks are designed to capture the incredibly rare seasonal rainfall. To supplement this, the community relies on the physics of condensation. They angle their corrugated metal roofs specifically to catch the thick morning fog. As the cold metal meets the damp air, water vapor condenses into heavy drops, sliding down the grooves into narrow collection gutters. The very first physical action of any resident's day is to unseal the heavy concrete cover of their cistern. They must physically inspect the meager, stagnant water level. Every single drop required for hydration, cooking, and basic hygiene must be calculated against the long months of impending drought. Breakfast is not a casual meal, but a necessary ritual of intense caloric loading for the brutal muscular labor ahead. Agriculture in a landscape completely devoid of surface water forces a total reliance on a method known scientifically as dry farming. We watch as the farmers march out onto the vast, black expanse. They carry nothing but a simple, heavy wooden-handled hoe, locally called an angsada. The top layer of the volcanic ash, the Pico, is highly porous, coarse, and completely devoid of moisture. It acts as a thermal blanket, trapping intense heat on the surface, while shielding the deeper layers from evaporation. Using raw muscular force, the farmers swing the heavy iron hoe down. The blade strikes the abrasive pumice. The dull, rhythmic thud of metal hitting volcanic slag echoes across the silent crater, a metronome of human survival. They must dig deep, precise craters through the black, loose gravel. They force their way down until they reach the hidden layer of ancient, residual moisture trapped far below the surface. In this abrasive soil, they plant their manicum grapevines. They do not build tall wooden trellises for their crops. Any plant standing upright at this altitude would be immediately snapped and shredded by the violent wind tunnels that sweep violently through the caldera basin. Instead, the vines are forced to sprawl flat against the black earth. The green leaves hug the warm, dark stones to escape the lethal velocity of the winds. The hands of these farmers tell the most accurate, unfiltered story of this volcanic land. Their palms are deeply calloused, forming thick layers of dead skin. To protect against the constant friction of the wooden handles. The skin around their knuckles is permanently cracked by the dry air and stained deeply by the fine, dark dust of the basaltic terrain. In this mechanical void, where modern machinery cannot traverse the jagged terrain, muscle and bone remain the only engines of agricultural transport. Patient, heavily muscled donkeys serve as the silent, essential companions of the crater. These animals carry heavy, hand-woven wicker baskets strapped tightly to their flanks. The baskets are loaded with either harvested grapes or strictly rationed plastic cans of water. The animals step with extreme, calculated caution. They navigate across treacherous, jagged fields of sharp pohoho lava rock. Every footfall must be precise to avoid slicing their hooves. On the glassy, razor-sharp edges of the volcanic glass, the relationship between the human, the animal, and the rock is an unspoken contract of mutual endurance. Once the grapes are painstakingly harvested from the sharp, unforgiving ground, they must be immediately transported to avoid premature fermentation under the harsh atmospheric heat. The destination is not a modern, climate-controlled facility, but a network of natural, underground chambers. These chambers are not built by human hands. They were formed centuries ago when massive, flowing rivers of lava cooled rapidly on the outside, creating a hardened crust. Meanwhile, the superheated molten core continued to flow and eventually drained away, leaving behind deep, insulated geological voids. These structures are known scientifically as lava tubes and locally referred to simply as the grottos. The farmers utilized these dark, subterranean cavities as natural fermentation cellars. Above ground, the temperature fluctuates wildly, dropping to freezing temperatures at night and soaring to blistering heights during the day. However, deep inside the basaltic crust, the immense thermal mass of the surrounding rock acts as an absolute insulator. It maintains a constant, cool, and perfectly stable environment, regardless of the violent weather systems raging on the surface. This geological stability is an absolute necessity for the complex biochemical process of turning the fragile manicomb grape juice into wine. The perpetual darkness inside the lava tubes prevents the ultraviolet degradation of sensitive organic compounds. Simultaneously, the cool subterranean air actively slows down the metabolic rate of the natural wild yeasts present on the grape skins. This precise thermal regulation allows for a much longer, deeply controlled fermentation cycle. The resulting liquid extracted from these dark caves is thick and deeply red. It carries a strong, unmistakable metallic taste on the palate. This unique flavor profile is a direct chemical reflection of the high mineral content, specifically iron and magnesium, drawn from the volcanic soil. It is also imbued with the faint, lingering traces of sulfurous gases that are permanently trapped within the porous structure of the rock. The agricultural cycle here is not merely a task of cultivation, but a constant, exhausting battle against the atmosphere itself. From the month of November, stretching continuously all the way until the end of July, the island faces the relentless onslaught of the Bruma Seca. This term roughly translates to the dry haze. It is a severe meteorological phenomenon driven by the powerful, unyielding harmattan trade winds. These winds originate from the vast, arid expanses of the Sahara Desert in continental Africa, blowing directly across the open Atlantic Ocean. They carry millions of tons of microscopic, completely desiccated sand and dust particles across the sea. When this massive, airborne cloud of atmospheric dust collides with the towering peaks of Fogo, the pressure drops, and the dust settles heavily into the caldera basin. The sky completely loses its natural, vibrant blue hue. It is rapidly replaced by a suffocating, dense, apocalyptic shade of yellow-gray. The sun is visually reduced to a pale, hazy disk, filtering out the crucial ultraviolet light. This severely limits the necessary solar radiation required for the already struggling plants to perform optimal photosynthesis. For the human respiratory system, the Bruma Seca is a relentless physical torment. The microscopic silica particles infiltrate every single breath taken in the open air. The atmosphere becomes highly abrasive, actively drying out the mucous membranes in the throat, nasal passages, and lungs. This causes constant irritation, forcing the locals to endure a deep, chronic hacking cough that echoes through the quiet village. Visibility drops drastically to just a few dozen meters, wrapping the jagged black landscape in an eerie, suspended twilight that lasts for months. During the absolute peak of the dry season, the midday sun transforms from a source of life into a lethal, oppressive force. The surface of the caldera is almost entirely composed of black pumice, basalt, and sharp volcanic slag. In the study of thermodynamics, the color black is the ultimate, absolute absorber of the solar spectrum. Instead of reflecting the punishing ultraviolet and infrared rays back into the upper atmosphere, the dark ground absorbs nearly 100% of the incoming solar energy. The surface temperature of the rock spikes drastically, turning the entire crater floor into a massive, radiating thermal oven. Intense waves of thermal distortion ripple violently upward from the superheated ground. These rising heat waves physically bend the light waves, creating shimmering, disorienting optical illusions that distort the shapes of the distant caldera cliffs. To survive walking on this superheated surface, the farmers cannot rely on standard, factory-made footwear. To combat this, they must craft specialized, ultra-thick soles using multiple layers of dense, recycled tire tread. They bind these heavy rubber layers together with thick metal wire, creating a heat-resistant barrier capable of withstanding the daily thermal assault. In an environment where evaporation rates are catastrophically high, the preservation of subterranean moisture dictates the absolute line between life and death. To protect their water reserves, the community employs a highly specialized, ancient agricultural technique known as dry mulching. They meticulously gather specific sizes of lightweight, highly porous volcanic pumice stones. They carefully, deliberately arrange these rough stones in dense, overlapping layers directly over the exposed soil surrounding the fragile roots of their crops. This physical layer of rock acts as a critical thermal barrier. It physically shields the damp, underlying subsoil from the intense, direct thermal radiation of the midday sun, blocking the process of evaporation. Furthermore, the deeply porous nature of the pumice stones serves a secondary, life-saving function. During the freezing nights, the stones trap the cold air and the heavy, moisture-laden morning fog that rolls over the crater rim. As the temperature drops sharply, condensation forms rapidly on the jagged underside of these rocks. Throughout the morning, they slowly drip tiny, calculated amounts of water directly down into the root systems of the plants. It is a brilliant, entirely zero-technology manipulation of thermodynamics. This local engineering allows complex agriculture to exist and thrive in a geological zone that should scientifically be classified as a completely barren desert. The absolute isolation of this environment profoundly alters the human perception of risk. In the modern world, safety is a fundamental expectation. Here, danger is simply a daily, atmospheric condition. The silence of the caldera is never entirely empty. It is a heavy, highly pressurized silence. Deep beneath the black, porous surface, massive tectonic and geothermal forces are constantly shifting. The primary magma chamber, located several miles below the brittle crust, is never fully dormant. As superheated volcanic gases expand and compress within the subterranean rock fissures, they create intense, localized pressure fluctuations. These internal geological pressure shifts manifest on the surface as sudden micro-earthquakes. They are often too subtle to register on standard international seismographs across the ocean. But the local residents feel them deep in their bones. A sudden, low-frequency rumble vibrates violently through the heavy basalt walls of the stone houses. Fine black volcanic dust lightly cascades from the ceiling beams. A glass of carefully rationed water, resting on a wooden table, displays intricate, concentric ripple patterns. These physical microtremors are a constant, objective reminder. They serve as a cold, geological communication from the Earth, stating clearly that the monster sleeping beneath their feet is merely resting, not dead. The residents do not panic during these sudden tremors. They simply pause their grueling agricultural work, wait for the vibration to pass, and quietly resume their tasks. This stoic, almost unnatural reaction is born from a profound, generational understanding of their extreme environment. They recognize that their physical existence here is fundamentally a temporary lease, a contract granted directly by the volcano itself. When the brutal eruption of late 2014 finally ceased, the local government immediately declared the entire caldera a permanent, restricted exclusion zone. Military cordons were established down on the coast to prevent civilians from returning to the lethal, highly unstable environment. Yet within just a few months, the local farmers deliberately bypassed the armed blockades. They hiked back up the steep, treacherous mountain paths under cover of night, carrying only basic iron tools on their backs. They arrive to find their ancestral villages completely erased, buried permanently under a smoking, black plain of jagged rock. The heat radiating from the freshly solidified lava was still intense enough to melt the thick rubber of their boots. Visible pockets of deadly carbon dioxide and highly toxic sulfur dioxide gas pooled silently. In the low-lying geographical depressions, threatening immediate asphyxiation. Despite these actively lethal conditions, they immediately began chipping away at the still warm rock to claim their ruined plots. This mass return was not driven by ignorance of the extreme geological danger, but by an ancient, unbreakable biological bond to the soil. To them, living as displaced refugees in the safe, concrete coastal cities was viewed as a slow, agonizing spiritual death. They actively preferred the physical risk of the volcano over the permanent loss of their cultural identity. To understand this incredible psychological resilience, one must look at the brutal, yet perfectly balanced ecosystem of the volcanic cycle. Every few decades, the mountain violently reclaims the land. The molten lava rivers consume the stone houses, the winding dirt roads, and the painstakingly cultivated underground vineyards. The physical destruction is absolute and uncompromising. However, this exact same apocalyptic event is the very biological engine of their long-term survival. When the fresh magma eventually cools, fractures, and breaks down, it brings millions of tons of deep earth minerals directly to the surface. Over the years, the relentless trade winds and extreme thermal expansion break down the sharp basalt blocks into porous pumice and fine, fertile ash. This newly formed volcanic soil is a highly concentrated, raw cocktail of phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. It is scientifically one of the most biochemically rich agricultural substrates on the entire planet. The farmers understand perfectly well that without the destructive, violent eruptions, the soil would eventually deplete and die. The old volcanic ash would completely lose its vital minerals under the harsh, unyielding radiation of the sun. Therefore, the catastrophic eruption is not viewed as a divine punishment, but as a necessary, violent agricultural reset. The burned ash of yesterday's destroyed homes literally becomes the nurturing, fertile womb for tomorrow's grape harvest. As the earth rotates, the sun begins to dip below the jagged, vertical rim of the towering caldera walls. The intense thermal radiation from the sky immediately ceases, and the ambient temperature plummets rapidly in the thin mountain air. The suffocating, hazy sky transitions quickly from a dusty yellow into deep bruised shades of purple and freezing indigo. We observe a lone farmer finishing his grueling, exhausting day. He sits quietly on a rough, hand-carved stone bench outside his fully reconstructed basalt home. His deeply lined hands, permanently stained with the black ash and soil of the crater, hold a simple glass of deep red Manicum wine. The thick liquid inside the glass reflects the dying, orange embers of the indoor hearth fire. He drinks the wine in silence, literally consuming the very essence of the sulfurous, mineral-heavy earth that he physically battles every single day. He looks up at the towering, dark, smoking cone of Pico do Fogo. There is no terror in his eyes, nor is there any lingering anger. For the homes he has lost to the lava in the past, there is only a quiet, mutual, unbreakable respect between a fragile human life and an overwhelming, unstoppable geological force. This is the raw, unfiltered reality of human existence on the very absolute edge of habitability. It forces us to completely reconsider our modern relationship with the natural world. In our climate-controlled environments, we often arrogantly believe we have conquered nature. But here, in the isolated shadow of an active volcano, humanity survives not by conquering the earth, but by peacefully bowing to its supreme, terrifying power. We must keep seeking out these isolated, forgotten corners of the globe, where the raw dignity of human survival is still deeply tied to the ancient, violent rhythms of the planet. If this journey into the black, burning ashes of Fogo has stirred your curiosity, I invite you to walk further with us. Our next exploration will take us far away from the smoking mountains and towards the violent, crashing edges of the continent. We will travel to a place where people deliberately choose to make the unforgiving, raging ocean their eternal